guys, I'm Trina and this is my spoiler-free full series review of the Madman's Daughter trilogy by Megan Shepherd. The three books in this trilogy are The Madman's Daughter, Her Dark Curiosity, and A Cold Legacy. Each of the books in this series is a retelling of a different classic. So book 1 is a retelling of The Island of Dr. Moreau, the second book is a retelling of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the third book is a retelling of Frankenstein. I had not read The Island of Dr. Moreau before I read this series, so if like me you aren't familiar with that story, I'll give you kind of a brief overview of what sets up this series. Megan Shepherd has created a unique main character, our protagonist, Juliet, and she is the daughter of Dr. Moreau, and this setting is historical. So at the start of the first book, Juliet has found herself with her entire family's name tarnished. She grew up in London and her father is a scientist who liked to do these really weird experiments on animals, and this is very taboo, so it has caused him to be kicked out of polite society, and rumor has it that he has fled to this isolated island, but no one really knows where he is. Juliet has lost her reputation and her fortune, and she's just kind of trying to make a living in London on her own, and then one day she gets the opportunity to try and track down her father. She finds the secluded island where her father is hiding out, and she meets the island's inhabitants who all have strangely animalistic features. My thoughts on this series varied so much from book to book. I just felt like the series got worse as it went on. However, I did read each of these books a year apart, and I feel like just my thoughts and mood and what I look for in books and stuff has just changed over the past 3 years, and that's really why I think I kind of lost interest in this series, because looking back, even though I loved book 1, I can see that the characters and the writing, they didn't really change. They were always the same way. It's just I somehow lost interest in this particular style or the story. One of the biggest faults of this series, in my opinion, is that I feel like the three books lack a cohesiveness, because each of them is a retelling of a different story. I do think that the author did a good job at weaving all three of these stories together and leading one book into the next. However, because each of them basically started a new story, I just kind of felt like, I don't know, there was a lack of cohesion in my opinion. And as I said before, I had not read The Island of Dr. Moreau before reading this series, so I feel like maybe not being familiar with it is part of what allowed that first book to work so well for me, because it was a whole new story and I found that really fascinating. However, I have read and studied and enjoyed The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein, and I really feel like because this series was taking really beloved classics that I was so familiar with and doing them so differently, I guess that's what I didn't like. I wanted something that was more of a true to the original retelling, and I think that books 2 and 3 in this series kind of veered a little bit from their retelling. It's definitely more inspired by. In particular, the third book, A Cold Legacy, it's a Frankenstein retelling, but it's more of a very loose sequel, because Victor Frankenstein and his creature happened way in the past in this series, and then Juliet, our main character, is discovering how he did it and his methods. Another thing I did not like about this series is that there is a love triangle, and it is gone by book 3, so it does not last throughout all 3 books. But in book 2, I felt like for a love triangle to continue on in more than one book, by the second book at least, I need to be convinced of at least one of the relationships in that triangle. And I felt very unconvinced. The characters were so indecisive and Juliet was flip-flopping so much that it was just done in that annoying type of way that love triangles can be done. I don't hate love triangles. I like love triangles when they're done well. But in my opinion, this one wasn't done well, at least not for what I look for in them, I guess. The final thing I want to mention that I just didn't enjoy was the writing. We are limited to Juliet's first-person point of view, just what she can see, hear, and know. And I feel like to get around that limitation, I feel like the narration just kind of cheated and made her omniscient and just all-knowing. She just knew everything that was going on, why characters were acting the way that they were, and exactly what their motivations were. And I can understand if this was just something that Juliet was assuming to happen, but this happened enough times and we are supposed to take it at face value. I just feel like that's kind of cheating, and perhaps the point of view should have been reworked if you really wanted your narration to be all knowing like that. So those are the things that I did not like about the series, and when asking myself what did I like about it, all the books in this series do stay true to that original like historic gothic atmosphere and vibe. So I do think if you like that gothic setting that you would enjoy this series. I can't really pinpoint anything I liked about books 2 and 3. I just can say I really liked book 1. When I read book 1, and granted that was in 2014, I picked that book up specifically because I wanted a creepy book for Halloween time, and that book delivered so well. It was the perfect level of creepiness that I wanted. I was just in the perfect mood for it when I picked it up. And that's why I continued the series, because I thought, oh, that first book was so perfect for around Halloween time, I am going to pick up these other 2 books. But I feel like I can't give a personal recommendation on this series overall because I ended up being so unimpressed with books 2 and 3. However, I would recommend book 1. I think that if you're looking for a fall time creepier read, that it would probably give you that kind of vibe. Just make sure that you are aware that it does deal with experimentation on animals, because if that is a theme that makes you really uncomfortable, which it makes me really uncomfortable too, and I kind of have conflicted feelings about that first book because I was like, I hated reading that, but that's what creeped me out so much about it, so that's kind of why the book worked for me. But you know, if that's something that you can't handle or you just find very distasteful, then just know that maybe this is a series that you wouldn't get along with. So overall, there are more things I disliked about this series than I liked, but I would recommend checking out book 1, and I do think that it would work fine as a standalone. If you like book 1 and you want to stop there, I think that that would be fine. And honestly, if you go on to book 2 and you end up wanting to stop there, I think that works fine as well. Like, you won't know every single outcome for all of the characters, but because each of these 3 books are based on different stories, that book's overall story does wrap up well at the end of each one. So those are my thoughts on this series. I started out really loving it. It was a great fall read, but I ended up just kind of being underwhelmed, and yeah, I just wasn't that impressed by the last 2 books in this series. I really love the idea of this series, the gothic retellings of those classics. I really love the atmospheric settings of these series, but unfortunately I just kind of grew tired of and lost interest in these characters and the writing and the different things that were happening in it. So yeah, it was kind of a letdown, but I couldn't resist the retelling aspect of Frankenstein or Jekyll and Hyde. So, you know, I'm glad that I read it, but unfortunately this one didn't work for me. If you have read this one, definitely let me know what your thoughts on it are, and thank you guys so much for watching this review, and I will see you in the comments. Bye!